Hello everybody, welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 12 of season 4. We've already got some questions on the chat ready to go. We already had some technical issues, so why don't we just jump in and start doing some Cinema 4D. So here we are in S26, and Candy Trashfire has a link to arcanemotion.com, and they are asking about the top logo and if it's procedural or not. So let's see what we got. So this is Mike Pindara, and I mean, it goes by really quickly. Let me see if I can zoom up on it a bit. I mean, that just looks like a transition. Let's see if there's a more complex version that we can break down here, because it might be similar in there. No, different type of animation in the opening of the reel. It's a cool logo though, and I always love teal as a color. So yeah, Mike Pindar, he's actually in Chicago, so that's cool. He comes to the meetups regularly. What would I specifically do? I'm trying to think of what. I'm just trying to see if there's anything in the animation that like calls specific attention to itself, because for the most part I think there's just some nicely modeled letters with some nice materials and nice lighting, because the actual transition is, I think, really straightforward. It just depends on like the way you want to do it, and it just goes to, you can hide almost anything you want. I'm just going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And we'll also do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 27. I just want them to be approximately the same size. Let's choose a interesting font. I downloaded a couple fonts recently that I thought were neat. I think some of these were some of the new ones. Yeah, some nice big bold letters. Actually, in this font, it seems like the numbers are smaller, so I'll just scale that down to kind of match. Okay, so first of all, getting all of these kind of as similar as possible is a good idea. Well, modeling wise, like any effect we do on one, we should do on the other. So let's just step through and, let's try and make the question a little fancier so that Bobby's asking about the YouTube stream. That there might be a new link to it. If you go to the Rocket Lasso YouTube homepage, there might be a YouTube link working, but because of the crash, all of the other stuff stopped working. But according to this, it's streaming, but I can't see anybody in the chat, so who knows? Testing. Anyway, we could try and do a little bit of fancy modeling here. We can talk about some things that maybe people aren't familiar with. First of all, let's put a little more space between them. And then actually, what I should have done is we should do this with a spline. I wish there was a one button click to swap this from a spline to a text object, because they share almost identical parameters. So I wonder if they do literally share the same parameters. Like, can I copy those and paste them here? Paste identical. Yes, we can. So, even that goes to show. Anyway, we've got a spline here, and with a spline, we're able to then create additional things. Like that can be put into an extrude. And I'll make just a copy of it. It might be a little bit more manual later on us, but I don't feel too bad about that. So we'll make that thin. And now what I'm thinking is we throw that into a volume builder. And then a volume mesher, and we crank up our resolution significantly, probably even higher than that. So, and I mean, in an instance like this, because we're not running simulations or anything on it, the poly count doesn't matter like nearly as much, but I just want to throw out there something I was tinkering with for the upcoming plugin for the utility splines videos. But combining things inside this volume builder can be really fun, where if I make a duplicate of the spline and feed it in, you see I can get this additional circle. I would like it to have more density and maybe move it further back in space. And let's increase that radius so we get kind of like this nice secondary detail back there. And then I can make another copy of that spline. I'll pull this one forward. And that one, I'll say I would like that one to subtract. Let's put it to a 5 again, and now I'll increase the radius there, and you see I get this nice little extra detail, kind of this big lump or this little dip inside of it, getting, you know, additional detail, which I like. And then kind of the classic example was putting that spine on the very front here. Well, first of all, you just get that ring. But you see how quickly I'm able to make copies and get like something way more detailed. But putting this one and also subtracting it from the front, you can get this really nice looking giant bevel from the front. I gotta pick the radius carefully. Yeah, something like that. So this middle one isn't really doing anything right now. I'll delete it. But you can see there that, you know, I like the way that the text kind of pinches there. If you were to move it forward or possibly shrink it, yeah, it's going to be relatively simple. But you can get the extra detail of that, the flat face still being there. So really nice way of getting really kind of complex, advanced looking bevels and shapes and curves and cuts into a model that would be difficult to imagine how you might do that otherwise. Try to think of what I like the best. Kind of like that. But yeah, just throwing that out there is something that's kind of cool. And then, yeah, we could change this geometry however we like. Right now it is very high poly. We could feed that into the new volume, or not volume, the new remesh, which has the Z remesher algorithm inside of it, which is really good. But there's so much geometry here that it's probably going to take a decent amount of time to calculate. But dropping it down to something cleaned up would be good. Now, it's about to finish, but I should have immediately changed this to a lower density because it's kind of like, well, remapping this doesn't really do much for us. But if we drop that down to, say, 10% of what we currently have, then we should end up with something that is significantly more detailed than it would originally be, but it's going to be relatively low poly that we can run it kind of fast. The new YouTube link somebody's asking for. I'll grab that, copy. So can somebody test if this YouTube link is working? Because that's what I should be seeing the chat for, but nobody's jumped into the chat in YouTube. So, you know, could be streaming issues. Anyway, here's a lower poly version of the same thing. Just wanted to throw out some of those options, and then we get this remapping. Some of these corners aren't looking the best, but, you know, I don't want to stress out too much about those. Although I do want the next parts to run quickly because I was going to do a lot of different variation on it. Trying to think of exactly what I want to do. But, and I'm a little worried about the remesh. A little worried about the remesh recalculating and taking a while, but let's just kind of risk it. I'm going to make a duplicate of the remesh, and going inside, I'll select all of our text splines and paste in the modified one, and you'll see that we again get that smaller font. I don't want that constantly refreshing, so let's turn everything off. See the original one, scale up this text until we are approximately the correct size, and it looks like I accidentally typed in 1 twice. There we go. Now I can let that remesh and it'll figure itself out. Gotta turn out a fan. It's a hot day in Chicago. Current, oh, it's unlisted. That might make sense. Yeah, when I have to manually tell it to be public on YouTube. I wonder if I can change it while it's going, because I just changed it. It says changes saved. The stream is still going, but the I don't know. That will hopefully work. But anyway, good to know that it was just unlisted. So now we've got two different bits of text. Let's just say 1, 2, 3 and A, B, C. So if I wanted to transition between these two, we can kind of do it however we want to. So keep in mind, if you're hiding something, like it becomes pretty trivial to, should I make these editable? I kind of feel like I should make these editable. Turn off the hierarchies, make each of those editable, and let's just deal with the geometry, which is going to run really quick. So a thought is making a fracture, which we don't use too often, making two different fractures. Put ABC and 1, 2, 3 in each one. And then we can start feeding in different effectors. So the simplest one would be, let's do a plane effector. That one I can say I would like to, we can do the scaling thing. We might be able to do some sort of visual, because there's a visibility thing, but I never trust the visibility. Yeah, you see how all of them disappeared? So yeah, look how that's behaving. It's very strange. Although these fractures might not be exploding. Okay, maybe that's working a little bit better. Daria on YouTube is asking about finding previous episodes. You would do that by going to the Rocket Lasso archive channel. There's a separate YouTube channel for the previous live streams. Anyway, you can see on this that I can say that I can just change the visibility here by passing this through, which means it's on or it's off. And something I might be inclined to do would be, well, you can feed something in multiple objects. So in the simplest form, I could go to the second fracture, feed it that same plane, and both of them are being fed the same plane now. I was thinking about how I could invert it from there. What I actually want is undo that. I want to second the plane, and that second plane, which I'll move down near the other fracture, so visually we can tell what's going on. So now this linear field is fed into the first plane, which, let's be organized. A, B, C, and the second one. 1, 2, 3. So this one will be fed into both of those fields. So they both get it, and tell the second fracture to get the second field. So you can see both are disappearing. But what's cool about making two different effectors, but only one field, is inside of the second plane effector, I could say, okay, you're getting that result, but I would like you to invert your result. So now, by taking the single field, and we can probably pinch it down, as I pass it through, you can see that just by moving this, one is going to do the opposite from the other, and I only have to animate one thing. So even here, like just your eye is going to let these, let's turn off the colorizing. I have to do it separately, so I'll just say no color, and click on this one, say no color. Your eye is going to do a pretty good job of just letting that transition happen. Like as I move this, like, okay, well, those transitioned. They're not positioned in the exact same spot, so I think there's a little bit of overlap as I move through. But you can see how, you could do something as simple as just transitioning from one side to the other. And then, now imagine that we just hide it a little bit. Like there's all the kind of cool, sparkly, almost like techno magic effects on the other one. But even if we did the simplest thing in the world, which is put a cube in there, reset the transform. So now there's like a physical box that's hiding what's going on. So now as it passes through, literally it looks like the transition, like it just kind of magically happens as you pass over, even though it's the simplest possible effect. Like our brains just kind of fill in the details there. Now, obviously, this is the simplest possible version of it. Let's give that a save and jump into episode 12, scene files, number 1. And transition text. So then let's say we take this a step further, and instead of these being just like plane effectors affecting everything, I will pull those both out of the fracture objects, and we'll just rebuild all these from scratch, because why not? And inside of these, I would like a, where does that hide these days? Probably in the MoGraph menu. Yeah, poly FX, which is pretty fun. I'll just build it all from one. So here's a poly FX, and it's going to be fed an effector. Oh no, it just gets its own, no, it can get effectors. I guess we can directly feed in fields. I'm not sure what that would do, but I will just feed this a plane effector, and immediately you can see it's kind of this cool, crazy explosion. The best part about the poly effects is that it's treated as a deformer, so it runs really fast, really fast. So plane effector, outside of it, we have this modify however we like. Right now it's pushing out on Y, which mostly goes upward. If we push down Z, it'll probably explode, so you get this nice explosion sort of outward. And then we could add additional effects on top of it, but let's keep it as simple as possible to start out with. So that's a plane effector. Let's again make a linear field. And now I can pass this through, and you can see we get a nice morphing effect from one to the other. In addition to moving outward, why don't we also say that it scales absolutely uniformly to -1. So you'll see that they'll explode out in this really cool effect and then sort of fade in. So, okay, that's working great. Now, how about we duplicate, I'm going to copy the plane and the poly effects, copy, paste. And now this duplicate should be linked with its mirror. So now that gets fed under 1, 2, 3. Then we got the second plane. I'm going to say, yes, that plane should do its own thing, but it should be fed that same linear field. So now both of them are exploding in the exact same way. And again, just add an invert modifier layer. And now they're doing the opposite. So now, exact same concept, but a completely different effect where one is kind of exploding out at the same time the other one is exploding in reverse. So you get this really kind of, it's super fake, but like the eye really has trouble distinguishing between these two things. Back when I was designing the transform tool at Grayscale Gorilla, this is a lot of the concept, was the idea of something fading in while something else fades out, and this is the smallest possible version of it. And look at the different effects we can do just by changing the radius here. Like you can see one text, and now it's going to be a really slow transition from one to the other. But then and then the one we start out with, which is a reasonable kind of transition, where you see one just kind of explode out and the other pull in. But then you can pinch this down real small, like we can still let it be there, but look at how hard it still is to see. Let me even visually hide that linear field. I guess while I have it selected, it still shows up, sorry. But look how hard it is to actually see where one piece leaves and the other comes in. Like the eye gets so easily fooled here. So yeah, you get a lot of options for the effect that passes through. Which is just really fun overall. The idea of like how easy it is to do kind of any effect that you want, and then the modifications to the effect. Just by changing the angle here, we could do the exact same idea. Go to a world axis. I can pull this across, and we get a tilted version of it. Go forward, backward. We could get all sorts of delays happening on top of it. So those could get some wiggle where they kind of enter their final position. Adding in additional randomness as that transitions could, randomness added on there could add some extra chaos onto the entire thing if these were wiggling around and traveling in kind of a drifting sort of way. I'm trying to think of how would I like to kind of demonstrate that. Even here, because we've just got these two plane effectors, each needs to be fed in. We still have that invert, so maybe to make it a little bit more advanced, let's make a group field. So there's a group field, and the group field will get the linear field, so that gets dragged in. And then in the plane, that's not there anymore. It gets replaced by the group field, and inside the second one, the effectors, it's getting this plane. So in this plane, it's currently got the linear field invert. Now linear field gets replaced by this group. So anything we do in the group gets applied to both. So pretty much I just changed nothing. So we still get this nice transition. But inside of the group field, we have the options of putting in additional effects, say a random field. These are going to get, let's say, overlaid on top of the previous one. And that needs, well, let's say normal for now. So it's completely overriding. You see the overall effect that it has. So here's a scale. And let's see, it seems pretty random to me. We give it some animation speed. It is noise based, so if I just hit play, let's see what we get. More speed, please. Yeah, so now all these different polygons are all kind of wiggling in and out. They feel a little bit individual, so let's try cranking up the scale. Yeah, okay, now we get a little bit more of a wobbly, warbling effect. So now if we set that to overlay, so reactivate this, put that to overlay, then now at that transition point where the linear field is, we get this wiggle going. So kind of subtle overall because of just the overlay, but getting that little bit of extra animation can go a long way. Think of how much that would change by just shrinking the scale. So now every single one of those looks like it's individual. Speed it up, and now you get this kind of shaking effect. You could make this noise more extreme. If we say remapping, change the curve. This is my favorite way of increasing contrast. I can pull that handle further over. I can pull this handle further over. That'll increase that contrast a little bit. Go back to the linear field. And now as this passes through, you just see we got all that kind of chaos happening in between. Pull this in, let those travel across. And again, just helping hide a transition. The two plane effectors could, we can push out those effects further so those can like really explode out. So much bigger change there. Now we just pull this through, you get that overall explosion effect. I mean, I think I pushed that a little bit too far with the two planes. And then even things to think about is like, you could, these two effects going in and out don't have to be identical. Like right now, we could grab this plane and say, okay, one's going out on Z, but let's have the other one come in from negative. So one's coming in from the inverse space. Calm down that animation speed. And now one's pushing out, the other's pushing in. Ooh, yeah, look at that. So now they both kind of have the effect of pushing outward, and I feel like it's hiding the effect even better. Like, I feel like those are just kind of appearing. Those are just appearing so much better. And if we go the opposite direction, because now they're inverted, if I go the opposite direction, everything feels like it's pulling in. Like there's a feeling of pulling in-ness. And if I go the other direction, it feels like it's pushing out. And that's just manually pulling here. So yeah, when you think about those types of options and the unlimited ways in which you could hide this. So you do that, and now imagine that we just put a bright light in there. We probably even just do this simple in the viewport. I am defaulting to redshift here. Kind of feel like point light's what I want, but we're not going to see it in the viewport very well. So just for seeing it in the viewport, I'll put that to standard renderer and make a regular light. And if we put that as a child of the linear field, just having this bright light be the transitional point. And I'd probably make a light near the center. We'd probably give it some visual glow. If we wanted to, maybe I'd even make two, have one be a little bit more forward, and then give them both some, they would be visible if I was going full render, but we can give them a bit of a fall off. We should see that here in the viewport, so we'll give it a inverse square. Yeah, so they get super bright. Pull back on the brightness a bit. So even having this brightness as you go is going to add to kind of this like kind of magical morphing effect where it's like, oh, the focus is being called to that location. I don't know, are there more specific effects people are interested in seeing? Because this goes to one of those categories where it's like we could spend unlimited time on it and every effect would be completely different and almost unrelated to other effects. Like these things could continue layering on top of each other. I wonder if you could have like the individual letters also animated and explode the resulting geometry. I feel like you could. Like I'm imagining that the letters are like tipping forward or backward as the transition happens. Like that could definitely be a thing. You could have multiple layers of the text, so there could be some inner geometry that would help give this more structure. Would definitely work. And those could like transition however you want. What are... Transitioning from one thing to another is one of the most kind of universal like motion graphics effects I think that there is. Let's scroll down. Possible the Voronoi fracture? Yes, that's a good question. Like right now I'm doing a poly FX, but just applying the inversions on there, that should be pretty straightforward. Delete, actually those look pretty nice, so I'll save this as version 2. And then delete the poly FXs. And they do need to each be in their own Voronoi fracture. So that's going to break it apart. Delete the lights for now. Break these apart. I mean, honestly, let's actually start by leaving these pretty chunky. It's going to be easy to increase that if we need to. But yeah, these are broken apart, 2 different fractures. So one fracture will get one effector, the other fracture will get the other. And let's say that the fractures, let's not colorize because it's going to call too much attention to it. But now we get this. And yeah, these are all fractured apart. So now, as the linear effect comes through, you can see that individual chunks are going to shrink down and the other ones will pull in. Now these are looking a little bit visually obvious. And keep in mind the transition time. Like really wide is going to be a long transition time. See, this longer one actually hides it a bit better. So that looks pretty cool. But let's shrink it down again. And I think, I don't know for sure, but I feel like some rotation here. And it would be random rotation I want to do. So should we, yeah, keep in mind you can layer up additional effectors too. So if I were to make a random effector, Like I want the random effector to happen after the plane. So this random effector could be given the same fields, which would be, again, this group field. And then we'll make a duplicate of that. And this one is the group field, but inverted. Oop, don't click on the group, because otherwise it's going to put the invert in the group. So you can see this is going to invert the end result. So now the second fracture gets the effector after the plane. It gets the second, or it gets a random. And then the other fracture after the plane, it gets a random. So these randoms are now doing something as well. And just having this setup now where there's a plane and a random, like even now I'm going to say, hey, let's turn off the plane and let's just look at the randomness. So you can see right now they're getting opposite effects. So when that same linear transitions through, you can see that there's just chunks kind of moving out into different positions. So this is not affecting the scale, but you see how these are each moving out. So if one's out, the other one is in. But what I'm thinking would do a good job of hiding the things better is instead of randomly moving, let's just randomly rotate. So let's just do 360 on every axis. So we get all this crazy random rotation, and let's see how that looks as we pass through. And yeah, see how as these pieces move, it gets a lot harder to distinguish exactly where they are. So if we go and reactivate this plane, let's reactivate the plane. And even now, I'm going to say, okay, plane, don't worry about moving things. It's not going to move. So we're getting random rotation from the random. And the only thing the plane effector is doing now is scaling. So as one scales in, the other one doesn't. Or as one scales in, the other scales out. So now let's visually hide that random. As I pass this through, you're going to see these chunks rotate, and this is going to do a much better job. I always feel like this rotation does a much better job of hiding what's going on. So you see these individual chunks flipping around. As one goes away, it's like, oh, that other one just kind of appeared. And if this quickly transitions, like you can't tell that one chunk isn't coming perfectly from the other. So it's not like we have to magically morph one to the other. It just kind of happens as we go. And let's see, we can give that a longer transition here. So as these go, like it just randomly rotates and reforms. It looks like it's just building on. I think you'd need some transition here, but I bet even a relatively quick one here is going to feel like all right. Yeah, looking pretty cool there. And then I was about to do something else. That's randomly rotating. Let's just crank up the number of chunks. Why not? Like, I think that's just inherently going to look better. Sources. Oh, we have to do one at a time. I don't go overboard, but let's do 500. Yeah, that breaks it apart really nicely. And let's do, again, 500. Really nice. And that should just be mostly initial calculation time. Yeah, this is running nice and quickly. So now, even if I go really slow, look how hard it's going to be to follow any individual chunk and not know that that's not perfectly morphing from one to the other. So even it kind of went to like when those large chunks were working, it kind of proves that the small ones will as well. So you see, like, yeah, just an absolutely lovely transition. And I do feel like, we can click on the two randoms, and if we put a little bit of movement in there as well, so let's just give them a movement of 50, which isn't much. Let's turn it on and off. You see there's a little explosion of them moving around, but with those moving around, I think that's going to hide the pieces even more, because now you see as those pieces move around, there's an implied movement where it's like, oh, one must have moved into a new spot to do this magical transformation. So one is transforming into the other. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, thanks for reminding me about Voronoi, because it's just a nice additional thing to put in there. I mean, the transitions can be like insanely long. Like we can make this like super. Here's another trick. Is like if we just make this really long, if we zoom out enough, then we could be like, okay, let's pull this whole thing over here. And now everything's going to feel visually a lot more uniform. You see how it's like, okay, everything is built. And it's kind of like, oh, everything starts breaking. And then everything transforms uniformly. And then they all go together. But we still are just using a linear. So as I pass this through, we get almost a uniform transformation of the entire effect. Or you could even imagine, like right now we've been doing this like kind of very, it's a very small scale, but we could spin this around to the bottom. And now all of them will transition into the next one. We can pull it down. And then the most kind of uniform you could possibly get would be, let's spin it from maybe front to back. So now all of them begin at exactly the same time. They all do their own thing, and then they fade away. This could potentially benefit from, maybe you could put some dynamics on here so as they move around, they are bumping off of each other a little bit. The scaling can trip it up a little bit sometimes. You know, right now they're kind of randomly moving around a lot. I wouldn't suggest putting push apart on here. That's going to look too jittery. You could do some delay and some jiggle so they get to their final location a little bit better. I mean, you know, perfectly honest, I feel like the best looking one is doing this transition from one side to the other, from one over here. I mean, these could be changing color. I intentionally turned off the colors, but we could go back into this plane effector and go into field. Maybe we do it with linear field. Okay, slow down. In here, yeah, the color is coming through, and that has color. That does not have color. Tell the invert not to invert color. And in this one, I think we already turned that on. So yeah, that should just be working. In the linear field, if we go to color remap, you can see it's saying, hey, go from whatever your default color is to blue. But we could say, actually, be a gradient. And yeah, there we go. And we could do whatever gradient we want. We could load in the presets. So you could get like a cool kind of crazy rainbow. Bloop. So now you get this rainbow transition. But what I was going to say is, let's go back to, well, I'll just undo. Go back to a kind of generic default. If all of these were, if you start out with one color and then you end with the same color, this transition is happening over the course of that transition. So you could even get additional effects just from the color changing. You see it's going to start black and end black, but as it transitions, you get this white morph going as well. And that could be driving a color channel. That could be glow, you know, that could be a glow that's getting applied. Maybe it's getting red hot while that transition is happening. We could put tracers on each of these individual chunks as they slowly move in, so you get some like little trails from them. So yeah, this layers up in so many different crazy ways. I'll save this as the third version and see if people have additional questions on this. Is it Type Ogre is asking about if it's possible to get big chunks but mostly small chunks, and yes, that's you know, I like that as a kind of follow-up question here. Let's focus on just one of these so you can see how the chunks are looking. So right now this Voronoi fracture is using this point generator and it is just randomly generating a distribution. Now there are different distribution types, so we could say like they're uniformly distributed, or they are, what's a better way to show this? I'm going to turn off the plane, turn off the random, and recolorize the chunks. That should be the best way of showing this. Okay, so you see we have all these different chunks and they're very even overall. But if we go to the sources, and we got different distribution types. So you can do normal, inverse, normal, and exponential, but those are all like directional, I think. You can see where every little dot is where there's a chunk. You see we've got like lots of detail here on the outside, but very little in the middle. What I end up usually doing is generating my own pieces somewhere. So what would be a good way of clustering? Okay, so this is going to be a little bit roundabout. So right now, the fracture, there's no sources, so each piece gets turned into its own chunk. It's so important to remember that you can use a Voronoi fracture like a fracture object, and sometimes it actually behaves better for you. But in this case, what I would like to do is create a cloner. Yeah, this should work pretty well. Thanks for the donation, Juan. It's appreciated. I've got cloner, and what I think I'm going to do is just create a plane, simple plane, put it into the cloner, and it's going to be really small. Let's make this only like 10 by 10, 1 polygon by 1 polygon. So, you know, just some small polygons. In fact, and we can make it really tiny. I'm just trying to make it so that we can still see them. So now what I want to do that? Well, I'd like to clone onto an object. The object will be the original ABC, and it's currently randomly cloning onto the surface. So you can see I can pull this up and you can see I get random random planes, random polygons appearing on the surface. So that's fine. And we could break the object apart like that. You could feed this in as a source, but here's the thought. What if I I'm going to break those down into one object using a connect. We don't need to weld. So now we can just think of that as like a polygon object that happens to have some polygons sprinkled around. So then I will make a matrix object. And this matrix object, I'll say, is going to clone onto an object. The object will be this connect object, which are all the little planes. I can randomly distribute these on the surface. So I can just keep on making more and more. So now I can say that there are 1,000 different matrices, and the matrices are all clustered in pretty much identical spots. So now on this matrix, I will create a random effector, make it a child so I can tell, and I'll just pull the strength back for now. And you can see that we've got these clusters, and I can start, you know, kind of declustering them a little bit, spread them apart. So now we've got areas where there's heavy concentration of matrix objects, and then we've got areas where there's a low concentration of matrix objects. So inside of our Voronoi fracture, I'm going to feed this matrix in as the source. And now if I hide that matrix object and our geometry, hopefully what we're seeing is we've got a large chunk, like right here, there's a nice big one, but then we get a bunch of small ones clustered in these areas. So, you know, the center of each of those matrix objects becomes another kind of, well, that's the way Voronoi works, is it's the halfway point between any 2 points. So the less randomness I put in here, it's going to have to refresh, but if I put very little randomness, you're going to see that there's a lot of clustering. Keep in mind that inside of here, there's going to be a lot more pieces. So we get big pieces where there was no clusters and a bunch of pieces where they are. So let's just find kind of a nice middle ground here. And I'm trying to think of a good way of showing it. I guess I'm going to throw a push apart effector on here. Push apart. And set the radius real small. I'm just going to increase this. So you can see as these... I guess I'll make the radius larger and just make the effect weaker. You see if I push these apart, that we get a whole bunch of detail in one spot and large chunks on the other. So, and I just kind of arbitrarily did that. You can imagine different ways of placing this. I mean, I think I can't remember who was doing it, but somebody was doing a thing where they were painting hairs and referencing the hairs as a spot where everything is. So it's almost like you could paint where you want the extra detail to be. That would only be on the surface and not on the interior, but you know, that's a pretty good idea. This was randomly placing these chunks in different spots, but you know, that's working pretty well. And these breaks are all happening in particular spots. So I wonder if what would happen if they're not going to be identical, but the chunks might end up being in kind of relatively similar places if we make our other one reactivate and we delete its point distribution and we say, hey, you're broken in the same places. So if there's kind of a big chunk here, then there's kind of going to be a big chunk again. You got to think of them like volumes, but that should work. So reactivating everything. Let's turn off the color and grab the plane or this linear effector. I'm going to say, I wanted to turn off the color, but I think it's just let's say no remap. Refresh. Okay, cool. So now I just want to see if the chunks kind of feel like they're in the same spot. Yeah, sort of, kind of. Oh, the push apart's still there. Go away, push apart. Nobody likes you. Yeah, it's not adding much to it. You can see like that big chunk. There is a big chunk right there. And if you just kind of look at that spot, that goes away. Another one comes in that's definitely of a similar shape. I don't think it really adds much. Like those are not perfectly matching with each other. But getting that transition going, pretty cool. And then if I were to keyframe this, I'm going to need a bunch more frames. But if this is a relatively slow animation, I'll keyframe that and then go all the way to the end, and I'll transition all the way through, keyframe. So now that that is animating through, you'll see that this is, oh, I guess I missed the beginning by a little bit. Those are just straight up moving out, but we always go back to the random and say that those are actually animated. So this rotation is based on random, but I could say it's based on a indexed noise. And let's see if I can make them, I'm going to kind of exaggerate this, have them go like way further out. Yeah, so now you can see how these are kind of like swirling around. You see how they have like independent motion where those are swirling, where if the noise had 0 animation speed, they just kind of move out and in. But by giving it some animation speed, then now they kind of, you know, these pieces are alive, moving around. We could say that these are only traveling up and down. So now we just get this vertical movement. You see how like very straightforward, like it's just a plane effector, it's just a random effector, but by syncing them up, you get some pretty cool effects. I think holds up even when it's moving super slow. Like, it still gets really hard to see what any individual piece is doing. So yeah, individual chunks at particular sizes. Juan, again, thank you very much for the donation. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to check the chat a little bit more, see if there's more follow-ups in here, because I feel like in this category, this does end up being like a very practical thing. I don't talk about this type of thing very often. We always go for more advanced things, but this more almost like simple effect of being able to get absolute control over how these are moving ends up being pretty cool and applicable. Yeah, Crossfader saying make them dynamic and add a field force, which of course is something you could do. The problem goes to a lot of the dynamics, they're not very forgiving, so they just kind of ram into each other. I wish there was almost like a softer dynamics. How do I say that? Something where it's like, okay, it is trying to push the things out of the way, but if they start passing through each other, it's fine. It's a weird thing to say, but it would be. Let's see. I'm going to see if there's any follow-ups on this on YouTube. Mograph.com asking what would happen if we did the whole thing through a volume measure. Actually, that's an interesting idea. I don't think that these chunks are too crazy. So, and they asked this a while ago, but I wonder how it would look if we did put these into a volume. So they just kind of turn into some blobs. That's a cool idea. Volume builder, volume measure. So of course the resolution is going to be really important, but let's add the other one in. So now they're both blobbed. This is going to run terribly, but let's drop this down to 2. Yeah, so now we're down to 2. So now I definitely can't hit play here. Yeah, you can see how long it's taking because just how big it is. But now it's going to be kind of this liquidy blob transitioning through. And, you know, some of the particles will kind of disappear as they fade away. Other ones will pop in. And actually, while we're here, here's something that's kind of cool. And if you didn't know it, so that's, you know, that's working well. I want to find a frame where it's really kind of catching a letter at the midpoint. Okay, so let's say you wanted these to be pretty sharp and you wanted these to be very blobby. Well, I think we might be able to do something like that if I make a smooth... Actually, if you didn't know that, there's always something that kind of blows people's minds when they don't realize you can do it. We have the smoothing effect inside of the volume, so you can create that. But you can actually make a physical one by going into the volume, and you can see that there's actually object-based one. So here's the same smooth, but it's actually as an object. And making it as a separate object makes it so it's a lot easier to control it. So if I drop that in, so now we've got a smoothing, and it's applying everywhere. This smooth is just saying, okay, everything gets super smooth. And of course, that's, you know, super exploding the effect. It takes a long time to calculate. Everything disappears. Some of the order of operations in this scene are not cooperating. Let me pull that up, and then I don't know if we wanted to, but I'm going to make the third object, even if it's the first one here. Okay, so this smooth, which is going to be particularly slow to calculate, but we could say that the strength is a little bit weaker. And you see how it's kind of blobbing everything out. So let's say we want the transition to be very blobby, but we want the rest of it to be sharp. Well, inside of the smooth, it has a fields. So I could drag in our original linear field. And I can see that's only affecting one side and not the other. But this field we already know is kind of like 0%, 100%, or maybe the opposite. But by throwing in a curve, we can still use that original field and say, hey, you're going to come in with full power. And then at your midpoint, you're going to be, I guess I did the opposite. Let's put that at the top. I'll pull this to the bottom. So now we're saying come in with no smoothing. And then when you're in the middle of this linear field, you are very smooth. So I can pull this out. You see, you can recurve that. So now that's smooth. The rest of it's sharp. And it's just applied on top of that exact same linear field. That's where the power of fields really comes from, is the idea of this field doing so many different things, and that's remapping it everywhere to make it work even stronger. There's going to be, you see how both of them were showing up there? I think it would render properly, but me trying to drag this, there's just so many polygons right now that's kind of chugging. But yeah, we can definitely smooth out the midpoint, inflate it, all those different things layering on top of that as well. So yeah, very cool to be able to do that. I'm trying to think, I mean, we could, you know, increase our voxel size. but it might explode this to be, yeah, it's going to be so low resolution that even if it does calculate somewhat reasonably, it's almost not going to be worth looking at. Yeah, kind of gets rid of it. So, you know, can't do it in real time, but it definitely works. Jay Brown, welcome. Does this type need to be a polygon object? Could it be mode type? This could totally be parametric. The only reason it's not is because I wanted to, I did all that volume modeling, but just to show you, I think all of this is still robust enough. I can repair, get rid of the volume. The original, you know, so here's those models, but even having built this rig now, because we're just in this fracture, I can just grab a text object and let me rescue the original. I'll just do it manually. Who cares? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and change it to a different font. I think that's one we used before. Maybe it's a chunkier version. Yeah. So let's swap that in, and let's swap in a copy here, and say that one's A, B, C, D, E. And yeah, again, this one's a little, the text is a little bit larger, so I'll just shrink that down. Cool. And yeah, so that's feeding the text. Those should be broken apart. This connect object is the only thing I need to fix, where it was currently cloning onto the other geometry, which is gone. So I'm going to say actually clone onto this text object. That should fix this, and it's either broken apart properly. And now I switched out to an entirely, everything's parametric here, and you know, the exact same thing is still working. It's just a different bit of text. So, you know, this is free to type in whatever you want. 789, and it just updates. FGH. So yeah, super duper robust rig. Yeah, I like these bigger, larger chunks. Just spending a little bit of extra time to get those that way goes a long way. And you can see, it's like, okay, here, it's like, that feels a little bit too dense chunk-wise. It's like, okay, fine, easy enough. Just grab this random, not that random, this random, and say, actually, I'd like those to be a little bit more spread out, just a little bit. And there you go. Like, those are not quite so clustered up. Parametric rig makes it super easy to update, and now those break apart super nice. I like it. Random, random. Let's go in all 3 orientations. Got nice rotation going. Even, oh man, we weren't even pushing it, but that fades up and it's going to scale out. But I could grab the scale and start doing something like spiking them out. So let's say that I'm going to just tell this random that you can randomly scale. I'll say that you'll randomly scale in an absolute way so they can only get larger. So now you see they're turning into these big splintery spikes. And potentially we can even say, actually, these will get smaller. So I'll say minus 0.9. So they have the potential of getting really skinny and they get really long. That's applying to both. So now I can take that linear field and drag it across. And you can see, look at that. Like, look how hidden those are now, because it's just a spiral of pieces. Same chunks, but we're just randomly scaling them up. Ultimately, the plane scales them down to 0. So they do scale down to 0. But the random can introduce all this extra spikiness as we go through. And then here, the rotation becomes even more important. I know they're randomly rotating. But let's turn off the random rotation. Now we just get vertical. These are just vertical stretching. So again, look, completely different effect, but still transitions hidden well. And then in the 2 planes, let's say that those rotate, and I guess I want them to go forward. Yeah, so let's spin them both forward. So say 360 degrees forward as the plane passes through. So now, are they spinning opposite directions? Yeah, I think they are spinning opposite directions, which, you know, it's a cool effect. Like, that looks neat. And again, always keep in mind that, you know, if we spread this out, you can get a very different looking effect. So that can happen slowly, or that whole spin can happen over a very short amount of time. Like, look. So, oh man, that's looking pretty cool. But I think one plane effector should be the opposite. So I'm going to set this to negative. So hopefully they spin the same direction now. Yeah, look at that. So now everything spins the same direction. So you get a little bit more coherence in the way that those twirl. And that could just, you know, right now I'm doing a 360 spin, which is maybe a bit much, even though I think it looks pretty cool. But, you know, go into both of those, plane, and let's just say a simple 90-degree turn. And the other one also a negative 90-degree turn. So that should be way calmed down, but you're still going to get this feeling, the feeling of rotation from those individual pieces. And that's going along with the random scaling it up all crazy. Those could be reset. We could scale on a different axis. Okay, that's probably a bit much, but kind of get spiky that way. And yeah, just playing through. Exact same rig, just applying things slightly differently. I like it. Scrolling. Michael's asking, is there a reason to do it this way with a cloner matrix? I'm assuming you mean the breaking them apart, rather than using geometry glue. Geometry glue... Oh yeah, the geometry glue... Okay, it's a fine question. I'll save this file again. We got a lot of versions of this one, but I think it's an interesting topic. ABCDE. Let's again simplify. Look at a single one and unmodified. Okay, so we're talking about geometry glue here. You can see we've got my method that we just did where I have these different chunks in different spots. Michael brings up a good point that there's something called geometry glue. Under sources, I will delete, I guess we can turn off, that matrix object, and I'll add a distribution source. And this one is, again, random, so let's put a bunch of different chunks in here. So you can see it's all very broken apart. There's something called geometry glue, and if we enable it, we can have this based off of a lot of different things. And what this is, it can be based on a fall off, but fall offs are really weird. Let me turn on a fall off. I'm trying to remember exactly what a fall off even does. That should have physically created one, which is here. But, okay, that's not... I don't feel like we're visually seeing it represented, so let's not do that. In the fracture, instead of fall off, let's make it cluster-based. And what cluster-based does is this model was getting broken apart, who knows, like 50 times. But now we're saying, actually, restart. You've got those chunks that you have, but start recombining chunks again. So what you end up with is these really nice recombined chunks. You can see that this one has like welded itself to just these few pieces. So I still want there to be quite a few, so I'll jump this up to like 55. But now you can see you get these more complex cracks traveling through, which is really cool. Like, look at all these different chunks. But in general, these are going to end up being, I think, similarly sized because the text is random. Like, you know, we will get some smaller ones and some larger ones, but we don't have as much direct control over how they re-glue together. But having said that, let me turn these effects on and kill off that crazy scaling. And the plane also scaling. Oh dear, why is it still scaling? Plane. Don't scale. Random. Oh, that one's still on. Whoops. Okay, so yeah, you can see the individual chunks, and we can still pass this through. But what's cool is the chunks. You can see that the chunks have all this additional inner detail. So that's a nice detail on those. But yeah, that's another way. I don't use the geometry glue too often, but it's a great way of getting like these more advanced looking cracks. Those look really cool. And then there's point distance. I don't know what that one does, honestly. Bigger. Let me start increasing this. Oh, okay. I'm assuming that if a piece is within a certain distance of another piece, they get welded together. So this is doing an okay job. Like, this might pair up well with the effect I was doing. Like, if we had it randomly, you know, if we had random clusters like I did, this might do a good job of welding certain pieces with more detail together. But again, nice looking cracks going through here. I wonder if this combines with thickness, offset fragments, maybe one. Yeah, okay, that's cool. If you were just trying to make a broken apart looking model, if I change this here, if you say, hey, I just want to see like a 0.25 crack, you can actually see where it's like, okay, these actually have little chunks cracked out from it. So just as a kind of modeling technique, that's kind of cool. Back to the geometry glue, increasing the distance. Oh yeah, you don't want to go too far because then they start welding up too much. But I do like cluster. Cluster is nice. Although, I guess maybe that offset doesn't work as well as I thought it did, because you see these other ones aren't doing it, so maybe it doesn't work quite that way. Although you could kind of you could get that effect. Let me show you. So I don't think this offset fragments works as well as I hoped it did, because maybe that's just like one chunk that worked and it can't handle these multiple ones because they have to re-weld. So this actually happens before they get glued, is what my assumption is. But if we don't offset the fragments, then these are all like the final geometry. So if we were to do some sort of very small offset, you might get a little bit of Phong breakage, but my thought is if we group that and deform it, we actually have to deform it. So I'll put a plane, set it to a probably point deformer. Might be better actually do a polygon deformer. So if I say, yeah, affect the position to go minus 0.25, every polygon is pushing in from its normal just a little bit. And now you can, there we go, that's doing a good job. So now you can see we get these really nice, more natural looking cracks traveling through the entire model. That's kind of a cool effect. I like it. And then essentially the detail of these cracks becomes the source count. So if we go back to here, and a little dangerous, but let's go 10 times as many, way more cracks, but I still told it that there's only supposed to be 55 in the end. So essentially there's 10 times as much detail in these cracks, but we're still left with only 55 pieces. So you get all these really great cracks traveling through the entire model still. So yeah, that's just more of a Voronoi fracture trick rather than, you know, the specific effect. But, you know, all those are still available here for us to do the same animation. And yeah, now you can see all that detail that we created on the inside, these really nice Voronoi chunks through there. So yeah, keep in mind that you can get that extra detail inside of your model by using geometry glue. I rarely think about it, even though I really like it. Very nice. I guess that's more about geometry, so just to clean up, I'm going to delete everything that is not relevant, which is virtually everything. And we'll save that as the next version. Okay, we get all the way to 1F. That's pretty impressive from the naming scheme. Was somebody spamming? I don't think so. Okay, checking back with Twitch. Welcome, Tira. Thanks for coming and hanging out. Yep, we are destroying some letters and numbers and morphing them from one to the other. I'm just checking if there's any more questions in regard to this. Is it Candy Trash Fire is asking, is it possible to drag through slicer or mesh to spline as a field? It's a fine question. Slicer doesn't have any fields integrated. Mesh to spline, I did integrate some fields in there. And let's just take this as an example. So I'm going to connect these, but don't weld them. So this is all one model now. We just think of this as a, you know, something that was made editable, but parametric. And that will get fed into Mesh to Spline. This is a plugin that we make. So you can see that's going to, well, first of all, we're exceeding the point count. I'm going to override. So you can see that it's actually tracing every single edge. So these are now splines. And you see every single edge is turned into a spline. But luckily we have this checkbox called Erase N-gons. And now we're only seeing the actual kind of the real, well, you know, anything that's flat has now gone away. We got rid of N-gons. And then we even have, we can go further, we got like this threshold. So I could start increasing this threshold. And now anything that's really subtle is going to go away. So you see all these tiny little polygons. Those were very shallow angles. So I can very easily erase those out. So now we're left with, you know, and I can push that probably even further. Yeah, so now you can see we're left with very few spline lines. And that, you know, that looks neat. Now you'll see that we can restrict what we're seeing here. Well, there's two different things we can do. Fields are integrated into two different places inside the mesh to spline. And you can only use one field at a time, unfortunately. Although I think we have recently come up with a way of getting around that, but we didn't know it at the time. We have offset, so I can click this and offset. And you can see I can push all these different points out. So you can see those all fly away. Currently, we are using edge to spline. I'm going to say they're exploded. Oh, no, they're still connected, so maybe exploded doesn't work with that. Oh yeah, because it's moving them out before they break. I guess I could show you if we set that to percentage, we could shrink these down so you can see how, you know, these are each getting pushed out individually. And this pushing out can be fed a field. So that could be fed a linear field. And now you can see I can actually transition this through. And look, it does run really quick. So those can all explode outward using a field like that. So the offset gets a field. And turn that off. And then we have our, I'm going to not offset it all and go back to a full length. And then we can do a restriction via fields. So if I say don't restrict, you know, right now it's not restricted at all, then we could say that we could restrict via a selection tag. But I can click on fields and say limit to a field. And now you can see that there's a restriction field, which the linear field is fed into. And if we cross the 50% threshold, then either that line exists or it doesn't. So you can see how I can erase this out with a field by passing it through. And if we were to remap this, I could feed in a curve, and we can do that same thing again. Now everything's in there, and I can go and grab this midpoint, or as I intended, the opposite. So flip vertically. So now only the stuff in the midpoint of this linear field. Oops. Only the midpoint of this field is actually what's going to show it. So that's where you can integrate fields into Meshless Spline. Slicer, there are no fields in it, but you know, of course, you can use other cinema tools to potentially feed it through. Yeah, hopefully that answers a Meshless Spline question, though. Boop. Let's see. There's some people who got some ideas for... Yeah, the fracture tool is awesome. I love the Voronoi fracture. It's so good inside of cinema. There's people who got some new questions. I just want to see if there's any final follow-ups on this particular thing. Is there any feature or plugin to bake fracture animations to vertex animation textures? What is a vertex animation texture? Sorry, I don't know what vertex animation texture means. Maybe there's some technology I'm just not aware of, but that doesn't mean anything to me right now. People definitely like Monty's request, so let's move on to an entirely new question here. Clicking on this, it's some Instagram link. Mute the tab, drag it over. Oh my goodness. So we got kind of a tentacle venom, and I was going to say, and it looks like literally it's what they're describing, the mimic effect. The mimic effect from Live, Die, Repeat, or Edge of Tomorrow, as the movie is known, the two different titles. This is in Blender, so they're selling it on Gumroad, but it's Blender, so I don't feel bad trying to recreate it. But I gotta say, I don't think that we're going to be able to recreate it very well. We've kind of tackled some semi-similar ideas, but there's just too much going on here. Yeah, it's really cool. I super dig it, and it's VBBN19 Art who made it in Blender. They did it with geometry nodes, so that's cool. I don't know much about the geometry nodes in Blender, but I guess I've heard that they're good. I've heard them come up in topics before. Yeah, if that's made with geometry nodes, that's pretty crazy. I don't think cinema geometry, I don't think the nodes in cinema, I can't think of any way of my knowledge in it that would be able to do this. I don't have an easy answer to this. It's really cool. One of the, when you're going to look at something like this and try and think of R&Ding it, something you have to do is, well, like, break it down. So conceptually, instead of being like, okay, how do we make this kind of crazy walking creature? It's like, no. Like, imagine you just got like a tree. Imagine you got like the tree with its roots. So a tree ripped out of the ground. You got all the roots kind of all over the place. Now imagine taking that tree and then slowly moving it down to intersect with the ground. And as it does, the tentacles would move out and then move back in again if it moved away. Like that's the simplified concept. Having said that, yeah, we could do a couple of little things, but as far as it like really like kind of wrapping around, gripping the ground the way that does, still nothing is immediately jumping to mind because everything would want to cluster up, I think. We'd have to have set lengths on things. There's definitely some really nice... like wrapping and growing effects. Like, you know, just having a spline kind of touch the ground, take on its orientation. Like, I can think of some ways to possibly do that. You need the orientation, which is super tricky. And you need, they were also avoiding each other, which is really impressive. I don't, like, yeah, you could do spline and bones, but that wouldn't account for like the growth effect, and then the way they push away from the ground. I don't think that gives it to you at all. The part that throws me off, how do I explain this? Like, I'm going to use Ricochet really quick. So obviously most of you probably know Ricochet is a plugin that we make, and this is not going to work, but I'll show you like a thought I have with it and why it doesn't work. So if I were to make a radial, make a couple extra, we'll just make a bunch of them, and create a random just to get a little random rotation, and like not much. Let's just do like 15. So just a little random rotation on there. So if I make a Rocket Lasso Ricochet and say I would like you to collide with the ground, and you're going to be based off of a matrix object, but the matrix will be not the one that we automatically made, but the one I manually made. There we go. So now those are all randomly shooting, but I want the matrix to be rotated. There we go, -90. Okay, so now essentially we got a bunch of lines that are shooting at the ground. They're hitting the ground, and then they're ricocheting up into the sky. So I'm going to say, okay, Ricochet, you are supposed to be a set length, you know, so I'm going to make it, you know, just a little bit shorter. You see that these are now set sizes. And then I'm going to say, when you come to a surface, I want you to begin to align with it. So you can see how the ricochet, and let's get rid of the random because the random comes after. So you can see how these ricochet lines are actually hitting the ground, and then they kind of take on the shape of the ground. So if I were to take this matrix object and move it up in the air, do you see how these kind of feel like they're taking on the rotation? I mean, they are. Let's decrease our radius a bit. So, you know, it's like, oh, okay, look, they kind of feel like they're grasping the ground as they get there. And that might be a fine way of like making a tree. But you'll see that as I rotate this, that they're just going to, well, I guess they're spinning all right. But you see how they all start following in the same direction? Where in the reference, they did a really good job of avoiding each other. And this is not, none of these like lasers are avoiding each other. They're just each heading in the way that they're heading. So yeah, there's no dynamicness that way. So then you're like, well, okay, then you just make the whole thing a simulation. And you say, if we set these to a simulation, then we could like place them onto the ground and then pull it away. They would be avoiding each other, but they wouldn't collide with each other, but they'd still be bumping into each other, if that makes sense. Having said that, but yeah, Demi's suggesting some other things with Ricochet. I kind of want to do this without a plug-in to the extent we can, but even just doing the basic R&D, I don't know how far we would get. And even if we were using Ricochet, I don't think it would help too much. Here's my one thought. Let's just see how far it gets us at all. And I don't know that it's going to get us very far. Start radius, end radius of a helix. One of my favorite ways to get a straight line. Because they added a straight line spline into the new version of Cinema, but it doesn't have the settings I want it to. So we don't want to go overboard, so let's make 10 of these, 22 radius, just spin the whole thing around. Okay, so now we've got this. We just got a whole bunch of these lines. So it's kind of like the rig we just had, except it's vanilla Cinema, and they don't intersect or ricochet in any way. Okay, so if this plane became a collider, so a simulation collider, and then we tell these, to what degree am I going to have to make this editable? I think pretty much right away. So that goes into a connect. I'm going to tell these helixes to not be subdivided. That means they're currently 100 points each. It's probably too much. Let's say 20. 20 should be more than enough right now. Bake that down, so now you can see that we've got this many points, pretty much what I want. And let's select these top points and then grow a selection decently far down. Okay, so now what? Now simulation rope, fix those points so those can't move anywhere. If we hit play, I don't think we're gonna see much, maybe a little wiggle on the bottom just from gravity, but not much. Let's make sure that we are using my CPU. We got gravity. So I should be able to keyframe this object. I will put that into a null just to keyframe the null. Also, I'll rotate its axis to 0, so at least that's the correct orientation. Might save us some trouble later. Okay, so I'm going to record the position and just manually move it down. I have to change the time. Holding down Alt means nothing will refresh. So say over the course of 45 frames, I've now moved it this far down. That's pretty much all I want to do. So now I'll sweep this so you can see it a little bit better. It's going to be probably hard over the stream. Sweep and end side, T for scale. Okay. I don't know what the radius of those are. 5. And let's give the rope a radius of 5. And let's say 0 friction, so they're free to slide around. Okay, no idea what's going to happen, but let's hit play. Let's save it, because I have no idea what's going to go on. Tentacles. Okay, so let's hit play and just see what happens. Okay, so that didn't do anything. I thought that those being fixed would just move with our model, but they don't. So, okay, that's fine. Release them, clear the selection, and instead of that, I will make a, it'll probably end up being invisible, but let's just make a tank shape. That will be a collider because it needs to be part of the simulation system. And now in the spline, I will add a simulation rope belt. And now the object that's going to bind it to will be the cylinder. And we still have those points set. So I would like to set them to the cylinder. You see they each connect to the closest possible point that they can. So hopefully, I mean, those are going to flop on the surface a little bit, but when I play, then, oh, yeah, that's not supposed to be cloth. It's supposed to be a collider. Does that still work? Maybe. Oh, it's still keyframed. Chill keyframes. Okay, yeah, you can see those wiggling, so that might work. So let's see if I can, yeah, okay, so that is connected the way I want it to be. All right, now that goes into the cylinder. I guess maybe that comes out. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, so hopefully now those are told to go down. Okay, cool. So now, you know, essentially this is what I was kind of expecting. You see you get those kind of nice noodles like shooting out, like blurp, and then they wiggle around. They're obviously avoiding each other. There's kind of a pop there because they don't know what direction to go. Not necessarily the biggest problem, because if we added in some, let's say, turbulence, then that turbulence should be adding in a little bit of randomness in the beginning. So they already have a direction, so there's less of a pop. So let's give it a decent amount of strength, maybe a bit of scale. And yeah, you see now they don't pop because they had a little bit of like offset, so they kind of knew which way they wanted to go. So, you know, working okay. I think the tricky bit here is, like, what I want to do is add a bunch of friction so they like feel really stuck there, but then they're going to not want to slide. You see they're going to clump up in a not great way. So like, how do you make them slide but then not slide? And we could do a little bit of friction. So, but they wiggle a lot. Let's try adding in some drag. Unfortunately, there's only universal drag. But yeah, now they'll go where they're forced to go, and they'll slide pretty easily. But you know, mechanically speaking, it's like, okay, well, you know, we've kind of got a spread out thing. It definitely doesn't have that same nice placement that I would like it to have. And I mean, there's ways we could make these all twisted up, That's not my worry. But like you see, even in this most simplified of versions, there's things that I think it's missing. Yeah, the movement here isn't my favorite. Yeah, because you get these wiggles happening after the fact. We could drain more energy. We could do things like, we can make that be allowed to be more bendy. It's not great up there, but yeah, those are very bendy now. Maybe bendy's not great, but let's try adding in some stretchiness and see if that does anything. I don't think bounciness is going to help us. Still a decent amount of wiggle. And then a whole bunch of friction. I don't, once again, it's just going to make them pile up. I mean, there's a way where, like, I like that, but they're not sliding out the way the reference did. So, yeah, just trying to solve one problem at a time here, and immediately, this being the best thing I can think of as far as placing something. And well, here's the reason. Like, I wanted to place them this way because it's the only one that's going to interact with each other, which the other thing seemed to do pretty well. Like, they did not look like they were intersecting. And there could be all sorts of, like, tricks and whatnot. I'm trying to think of, like, what type of things might be in, like, those modeling nodes that would enable it. Because, like, a thought I'm having would be... How would I even place those? That'd be difficult. A to B to C. New... I don't know. I don't think this is going to work. How do I even... I guess... Well, let's see what happens. I'm going to make that. What I want to do is turn this into an Ngon, but what's great is we can do that now by going into nodes. Excuse me. We can go into our nodes and go to list view, shrink them down, geometry modifier, and we can melt. It should work here. So those melt around. So now I get my Ngon, parametric Ngon. If I... How is this going to work? If I make a tracer, that is now seeing that disk. If I make a second disk and put it in, and say I want to connect all objects, pull this down. Yeah, so that is one line going from there to there to there to there to there and down. Not what I want. If I say connect all elements, now it's the individual ones connecting to each other. That's not what I want. If I put a matrix on it, it's going to do the exact same thing. Yeah, the only way I can think to do it would be one at a time. I don't want to do one at a time. We could build a more complex rig that had intelligence. We're not going to do that, but even there I would be pretty skeptical of its ability to make intelligent decisions. Well, what I wanted to get from this was going to be that point connected to that one, that point connected to that one. But I think I kind of knew that there was no way to do that. We kind of have it in our list of ideas for splines that was something that we could do. Because what I was going to do, if it worked, was like, oh, this one is going to be the one on the ground. So that point would go to here, and that would go to there. And if you made another disk and you scale it up again, it's kind of like you get and then if I make this one, you can kind of think of it like a loft. Like a line would go from that point to that point to that point and slide along the ground. And that would actually be relatively clean because then you could start placing things in a more interesting way. Like we could do that. Now they'd be mostly like sliding out to further locations. That was a thought, but I didn't think it would go too far, and it doesn't go very far at all. Clone an object to the point and trace those. Nah. I see what you mean, but the problem goes to ultimately in cinema, we don't have any good way of having those lines all tangle up with each other without doing a simulation. But a simulation is going to require a not changing point count. So then how do you make something animate from one spot to another? How would you do that? Especially if they're all tangled up. It's important to note that there could be, I don't know, it could be a very, very crazy dynamic rig, but it's also important to note that maybe it's not a very dynamic rig. Maybe what they made there is it's a trick, in a clever way. I'll show the reference again. A couple of people aren't sure what we're making. So this is something made with Blender with geometry nodes. So very cool. And yeah, you see, I'm trying to see if they're intersecting. I'm not obviously seeing any intersecting. I feel like I would. Here's a thought. See, we don't see the same thing. Okay, look at the curl. Is it? I wonder. Like, I might be thinking of it more dynamic than the references. That was walking along very flat ground, right? Where I was thinking like, oh, this is super duper dynamic, but maybe it's walking a flat ground because that's the only thing it can do. If that's the only thing it can do, then here's what I'm imagining. How do we do this? Actually, this makes it so we can use ropes. In fact, let's go back to this scene file. Can I undo enough? Come on, undos. No, we ran out of undos like on the step that I needed. Okay. Okay, so we just gotta make it again. Okay. How am I gonna do this? What's funny is Ricochet would really help right now. I'm gonna try and do it without Ricochet just so, people who don't have the plugin can do it. But I hope people appreciate that I'm intentionally doing it, not using my own plugin to make it more applicable to more people. Okay, so no subdivisions, 100 points based on this height. That's completely fine. It's pretty much what I want. Clone it. Radial? Yeah, let's do radial. Let's not go overboard. Let's just do 8 tentacles. I'm going to set the radius to be pretty small. Put that into a connect. Make a plane. And the plane is inside the connect. Set to deform the points. No, not a plane. A random. And the instant I turn on point, that's going to explode. Pretty much what I want. And now we need these to be nothing on Y, but I need these to be kind of like wiggling around enough where they pass through each other because essentially I'm making the tangle right now. So I don't know if those are enough. I'm going to overdo it. So we'll do 22. That should definitely make it so that those are all kind of all over the place. We can say indexed, which should make them, yeah, that should make them pretty crazy. Although they do feel a little bit uniform. Kind of like this without it a little bit more. Okay. Do we trap these in the tube maybe? How do I spread these out? This is kind of arbitrary. This is the least important part of it. I'll make a duplicate of that. Make this editable. And, oh, we still got the random. I thought the connect would consume that. Maybe it will if I put it into another connect. When in doubt, use 2 connects. There we go. See, that worked. Okay, so there's no subdivisions. These are just the flat points. They should be all tangled up. They should be all starting in the exact same spot up here. So I select this first point. which did get modified. It might have been a good idea not to allow those to modify. But anyway, that now goes to using our awesome new rope, fixing those points, and I'm not sure what a good radius is. I'm just going to guess 5 again. And I guess there's no reason not to immediately put this in the sweep so we can see what it is doing a little bit better. 5. Okay, so just a little bit of radius on there. So these are all super tangled. The top should be stopping. The bottom's going to start to flare out, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, hit play. Oop. CPU. And you know, I'm going to put let's put a lot of drag in there. I'm not sure if 100% does it. Okay, so you can see what happened is all of them suddenly they all suddenly pushed away from each other, and now gravity's just allowing them to slowly sink down. They kind of shot off to one side. Not necessarily a problem. And the drag's doing all right. We probably didn't need it to be quite that much drag. Little bit of twitchiness up on the top. I think that we should give this like a lot of bendiness, which is going to allow, yeah, now you can see that they are able to bend. And now essentially you'll see what my goal was. I'll start over again. They're not stretchy, and you can see as it keeps on pulling them out, it's pulling them taut. And what we're ending up with is a lovely tangle, okay? That's the goal here. Now, I'm going to need these to be kind of a straight line when it's all said and done. Maybe not perfectly straight line. Maybe you don't have to worry about it. Unfortunately, well, it gets a lot longer. I guess that's not surprising. Let me think. I mean, there's nothing here that's not reasonable. So those all are stretching out. They should be going kind of straight down. I was thinking about putting a 2, but you know, it's probably relatively straight enough. But I'm going to bake it because in order to make this editable, you have to have it baked. So cache, calculate cache. It's a long timeline because there's a lot going on there, but let's just let that go. Crossfader, double connect. Very good. But yeah, right now I'm just trying to get a nice tangle of lines. The reason I was going to say Ricochet could have gotten us to the step very quickly without using the random. But, you know, that worked well. Okay, so it's baked now, and I should be able to just scrub through, and then we can see it ends right around there. So I had just about the right length of time. So, yeah, let's go ahead and call that good. I think I can put that into a connect now. Make it editable. Oh, dang it. I thought I was going to remember. Maybe. Oh, dang. And then usually, yeah, having it fail that way isn't surprising. Unfortunately, we have to cache it again. I think, yeah. Clear cache, cache scene. How do I make it not forget? Can we just delete the tag off of it? You can't. I think we can current state to object it. I'm trying to remember. It's always been that even soft body splines, those were always a problem that you couldn't. It was really hard to bake them down, essentially. So now, again, those are baked. We get to the point that those are straight enough. I don't think we can just delete that, but I think I can right-click and say current state to object, and now we get a second one that we can delete the tag off of. So now we can turn this one off, and now, yeah, now I've got it without the tag, so now we've got a spline. So now we got our tangled up spline working just fine. So now, now that we have that, this is not, how do we have to have these? I might have to explode these out. Let me slow down and just think through here. I don't think we need the same point count on everything. So a couple of these are not cooperating, so I'll clean those up. And then we got the bottom. That's all right. So something we'd have to do, and I might even, you know, I might be inclined to run another simulation on it, but a thought would be we want to take these points and flatten them out. But I'm going to skip that step. I'm not going to worry about it touching the ground perfectly. What I'm more worried about right now is, can we get a smaller spline to kind of travel back and forth the length? That's where I'm at. Just copying that file, going to a new file. We've got this not intersecting. I'd love to smooth that out a little bit, but let's not use a tool that's not released yet. Can we, my first thought, yeah, I'm going to go with it. Do we still have... I'm going to copy this helix from the other file, paste it. It's so nice being able to jump between files in a tab. This one will be, let's say, 200 of the length. And I'll do, 20 of the points, keeping the same ratio. Make that... This did stretch out a bunch, so maybe I should go 400. Make that editable. Okay, so now we got a single spline. Now, deform spline. Oh, come on, where is it? Spline wrap. Okay, spline wrap the helix. It is currently vertical, so I can say, okay, along Y, I would like you to align with that spline. Hide that spline. And now we see that the helix looks like it's perfectly matching. The spline wrap does a weird thing that's kind of good and it helps us out quite a bit, is it clones the spline onto every different spline. So now, here's the thought. With our spline wrap, I could say that this goes from 0 to, let's say, 25%. Okay? So look at that. So now we've got this kind of tentacle-y thing right there. And now if I grab my offset, I can say, hey, travel upward. So now we've got something that we can have travel back and forth. Maybe we actually want this to be 50% of it, now that I think about it. So we don't want to, essentially we want to go from 0 to 50, 0 to 50. And you see how that can travel back and forth, back and forth. So let's just do that. Control D, I'm going to make it very mechanical to start out with. Control D, project, no, animation, linear. Okay, so I would like offset to be keyframed, and then let's just say 30 frames later, it goes all the way to 50%. Pretty much that's all I want that to do. Pop this open. I wish this was a little taller when it comes out, but now I will select all those and duplicate. Actually, why don't we just repeat? I always forget about that. Let's say, how do you make those repeat? I haven't done that in a bit here. After constant repeat, or I think oscillate. Yeah, we want to go back and forth, back and forth. So oscillate, repetition 0, I think means repetitions forever. So let's see, forward, backward, forward, nice. And then if we, and now that that's looping, if we want to get fancy, I can switch over to F-curve mode, and now we've got this basic thing, set that to spline, and now we got that flattened out thing, so it should stay on the end a little bit longer. If I was being, we should probably even make it stay on the end for a while, but let's just leave it like that. So now you can see it's going back and forth and back. Okay, nice. No timeline. Let's give this a save. I know that the previous file we didn't save that, but that was already a giant mess. All right, so the midpoint of the original line is definitely not where it currently is. I'm going to select all these points and go 0, 0, 0. So essentially that should be averaging out the position, just meaning that the axis is actually pretty much the center now. That is oscillating back and forth. Okay, now we've got this length of spline. I'm going to paste because I still have that helix in here. And this helix, I need it to be as long. I need it to be as long as this entire thing. So scale it up until we're the length of pretty much the entire thing. It's 100 points right now. I'm going to drop this down to 10. Make it editable. Save, select the entire spline, character, convert spline to joints, and now I've got a joint chain. How do I... Yeah, so that's a joint chain of 10. Now, I probably want 3 points. So I'm going to manually select the first one, the last one, the first one, and the midpoint. Invert, UI, delete. So now I've only got 3 points on there. On this joint chain, I think on the joint chain, I shall right-click and say rigging, IK spline, link the spline, say the end point of the joint chain, and then create a handle for every point on the spline, which is 1, 2, 3, and we can say create, create, create. So now we get 3 nulls. So now you can check it out. I can pull this out, and now we get a nice stretchy, wiggly line. I will tell the spline to equal the length, and then our individual handles each have a set length here as well. So I could set these all up to, I don't know what's a good number, let's say 200, which is hopefully going to give us a bit of a curve. Yeah, you see there's a bit of a curve to that now. Okay, save. Okay, so now let's see, this is, let's just call this start, mid, end. And then we get a spline, and this will actually be the, you know, I don't know, I'll just call it the leg. We don't need to see that spline anymore, but these controls are super important. So now we tell, essentially we want to copy this spline wrap onto the connect. The connect is the twisted spline. We are spline wrapping, not offsetting, from 0 to 100% wherever the leg is going. We probably need to make a rail spline here, but let's not worry about that quite yet. And that should be, the axis is Y, but it's all jumbled. From to, I'm gonna do this from scratch. The some property from the other one wasn't coming through very well. Spline wrap onto the leg along Y. There, yeah, I don't know why I didn't like it too much, but now that's being mapped onto that. And okay, so now hopefully maybe you can see a little bit of what's going on. Hide these. So there is a series of joints all traveling down, and based on where those are traveling, this spline is getting deformed, and now the twisted spline is being told to travel wherever that one went. For some reason we lost our curvature. Bezier uniform. Okay, I had to give it some subdivisions. I'm not sure why that turned off. Maybe I clicked on the wrong spline. I'm not sure. But yeah, now I can move this around, and you can see we get these curves to it. There's a pop on the direction. Like I said, we probably need a rail spline. Just not going to worry about that quite yet. Let's zero this back out again. Gotta do this in the proper order. Leg, uniform. Okay, save. Now, here is the next step. I guess I'll save it as the next version. So now, let's start imagining that this is one of the tentacles of the creature. So now I can use our controls, our start and our end, and our midpoint. And I can place these however I like. So now you can imagine that I would be able to say, like, okay, this creature is going to be walking. So I'd be able to take like this end point and be like, okay, stretch it and place it, and then, you know, grab the midpoint and then, you know, move it, and then have the start point, and we can step that. So you can imagine how I can start stepping this thing around. And you see how it's stretching because I told it to stretch to whatever length. But regardless of its stretching, these are all already kind of designed to not intersect each other because we did that original kind of collision pass. So now that all of that's happening, let's hide that original twisted spline and then just grab this cluster that should be kind of moving from one side to the other. So now we've got this cluster that's going to bounce from the start to the end. That looks like it is, well, let's put that into a sweep. And put that into a subdivision. Make that a little bit bigger. So now we've got this blobby cluster of tentacles. Very large. This blobby cluster of tentacles that are moving in and out. Now we have additional options that we could do as far as like twisting. I'm not sure if we can twist. No, we can twist in here. So even in this mapping, we can twist, although I think it's this twist that I want. Under rotation, we could say I want to give it some banking, and you can see I can start twisting around. And if we grab the rotation, we can actually, right now the entire thing is spinning around. But if we do this, we can say, hey, transition slowly over time. So now you can see I can do additional twists to it. Is it twisting? Feels like it's still spinning. Maybe that's the set rotation. Maybe this is the one I want. It still doesn't feel like it's twisting very well. Maybe. I feel like that should be working. That's just banking, though. There we go. Okay, it's not banking. It's not banking I wanted. It was rotation with the rotation strength. So not the most intuitive there. Usually the spline comes after the rotation. So yeah, anyway, my point being I can add some extra twists in here. They should be still kind of avoiding each other. We could maybe run in the simulation so they separate each other out a little bit more. But I'm not sure exactly where these place. So now you see that we get this kind of crazy stretchy thing going, like stretching from one side to the other to the other. Inside of the keyframes, actually the F curves, I think I actually want to, actually no, keyframes. I would like to duplicate these points so it kind of stays there for a while, and then that will stay there for a while. Blurp, blurp. So I didn't splay out those ends, but you can see how those are sort of twisting, and then they're, they'd end in the other spot. Adding in some additional maybe wiggling or animation. The radius, I don't want to make these too thin because they get harder to see, but yeah, because I keep on increasing the radius, they start intersecting. And the twisting will probably add a little intersection as well. But now you can see how those would go back and forth. And if we started timing it, like, there's a whole bunch of them at the same time. So if the step was happening at the same time, it was kind of reaching for that, we could place it down. Maybe it was even a bad idea for me to go like all the way from one side to the other. Maybe it's supposed to be more like the midpoint, just to the end, and each one becomes its own self-contained one. That's not necessarily a problem. That just means I should put this up here, like if this was the center of the creature. That's where we put the start, and then grab the midpoint. We'll pull this out so we have a little more control. And now the offset should be 0 to 50. That goes all the way. So 0 to 50. Isn't that what we were already doing? 0 to 50. Oh yeah, but 0 to 50, and that shouldn't move. Yeah, okay, I'm going to just kill off all the animation. So we actually start, is the spline backwards? Start and end are backwards. Dang it. Okay, well, apologies, but yeah, start and end are going to be backwards. So we want it to, essentially we're just doing this. So we're like stretching that out. And then as long as that's on the ground, we're free for the sphere to like be moving around. So it's like, oh, I can take a step. And once that's done taking a step, then this could retract all the way inside. At the same time, like two other ones are starting to stretch their way out of, they're starting to stretch their way out of the center point. And with all of that timed with some nice keyframes, where, you know, this is like stepping into a new location. Like even that right now is placed in the location. Of course, some movement on it would look nice. What's going on with my endpoint? Oh, I grabbed the wrong one. We should be animating that one, not this one. So yeah, that's... Oh, maybe the twist is in here. Maybe it was supposed to be this one. Yeah, that looks better there. And we can be twisting the other one kind of arbitrarily. So we get those all traveling out. I mean, right now I had it as one spline, so they're all moving. But this could be 5 different spline wraps with 5 different splines, so each could be moving out slightly differently. And then the main thing I didn't do was make it so that the original spline had like a splayed out hand to touch the ground. And as long as we had the correct orientation when it got placed on the ground, that would be fine. So that's the final helix. So this is actually the one I want. And assuming that is the end and that's the start. Yeah, the point here is if I placed this here and I was careful. I mean, we could do this dynamically, but you know, just modeling wise. Yeah, this is not going to be trivial. Wonder if you can use hair tools. That'd be interesting. Oh, I turned off the hair one. Oh, come on. Simulate hair tools. Tear. Brush. Spline. Aw, come on. Aw, why wouldn't those work on splines? That would have been so nice. Because I'm pretty sure you can't... Dang, doesn't work at all. I'm pretty sure things like the magnet tool don't work. Oh, okay. Well, okay, magnet tool does work, so that's something. But anyway, my point being is if we spent a little bit of time and we kind of painted all these, or, you know, dynamically place them, however we wanted to do it. But if we actually spent the time, and of course you want to do 3 dimensions, if we actually spent the time and placed all these so they have really nice contact with the ground, then we could end up with, yeah, and those had like some nice curls in it, so we could push these around, add additional points if we want to. I'll place that on the ground. So you see I get these nice twists and curls and everything placed all nice and lovely. So yeah, so you essentially are artistically placing these points of contact, which, you know, the other thing was doing so well, but that ends up just being the end point here. So reactivating our spline, you'll see that my feet, when they end, that they're touching the ground. I wonder if the rotation... if we do this tag right, we could get the rotation as well. Aim, tangent, joint. We need the spin. Yeah, twist, world-based twist. Object-based twist. Dang it. If we did it right, we could get the twist to work, but... But I don't remember the orientation. That's where one of those should have been twisting. I mean, that one, well, that makes sense, I guess. That one doesn't. But anyway, you can see how it's placing, you know, in theory, like that's getting placed on the ground. And that same growth should still be applying, so we could, like, you see how that does a nice job of stretching them out onto the ground. So, I don't know. I'm not sure if this has translated all the way through, but do you see how... it might be more this type of rig. I was thinking of it very dynamically, but there was nothing I saw there that couldn't be essentially this same tentacle arm used again and again and again, just to like travel out, and like as the limb moves or there's some sort of timing that goes along with it, that it's automatically growing out at the same time you're placing it into its new location. Maybe even setting the length. Yeah, that would be something that'd be kind of cool. Maybe the length wouldn't work too well there, but you could even use espresso. That's like, as I stretch out the start point to the midpoint to the end point, and as this leg is placed on the ground, that you could be like, oh, as the length of that spline is shorter, and we could make it quite short, that you could actually have this spine wrap rewind. So like that would be based on the length of the spline. I don't think it would work too well because, you know, moving the sphere here should be moving the entire creature. So you can even see here as it stretches how that still works. Like the if I got that twist working right, yeah, you could imagine this taking several steps as we go, timing it all out. I don't feel super inclined to actually go through the steps to time it all out, but does everybody kind of see the concept there? Like I said, on our original dynamic simulation, I would have liked to have put a little bit more space between these splines. Probably get some more points. There's very few points. You see it's very sharp here. That's actually another reason why they look like they're intersecting. If I turn off the subdivision surface, you see how it's like significantly different between the two. So this needed like 4 times as many points for the length that I ended up making it. But it ended up being double the length of the original spline. I didn't realize it would be double the length. And let me think. Yeah, like even right now with these all being uniform, I'm surprised how well that they're traveling through. Having a couple of different lengths in here could make them automatically time differently. But like I said, the entire rig could also be built so that there's 5 different spine wraps by exploding out the dynamic thing, which I think maybe there's 8. So we can explode that into 8 different spine wraps. So each one is kind of getting there at slightly different times. And then even... well, yeah, you could add additional like undulation by like deforming maybe this twist spline like this. No, the twist spline shouldn't get deformed. The original leg, we could put like a random deformer on there, so those points would be slowly kind of moving around a little bit as well. You just don't want these to be moving around a little bit too much. Let's see. Probably is saying you'd like to see more tools in the stream, more of my tools in the stream. I don't mind using it a little bit. I just don't want to be spamming our plugins in there. But I do appreciate that. Let's see. Tentacles, yeah. Elaine is saying that I could have potentially converted the splines to guides to paint with the brush. Luckily, the magnet tool worked, but that's good to know. And then I think the hairs actually do a pretty good job of collision as you go. Maybe, maybe not. But thanks for the heads up. Yeah, somebody's asking about the hype train. And yeah, right now, if you use your free Twitch subscription, or if you pay for a subscription for me on Twitch, then it can make like a hype train. I don't know what the point of that is, but it's just a way of supporting Rocket Lasso. And then bits are essentially ways of bits. I think I had to have my brother explain it because he likes watching Twitch stuff. But you can't just donate money. You have to buy bits and then you translate it. So it's like bits are just the Twitch currency for anybody wondering that. Yeah. People, we're already over time, so Matty 2x4, hit me up with that next week, or somebody might have even answered you immediately. Let's see, Lay Badger, if you posted a link in YouTube that doesn't get shared, wouldn't C4D hair do a lot of the work? That's probably from way earlier in the conversation, and you'll see that in the same way that the rope simulations didn't do what I wanted, the hair also wouldn't, and even that was not taking into account like the stretching and the retracting and stretching and retracting in a very particular way. So I think that the rig would end up having to be something like this. Essentially, now that we've gained the knowledge that we have here, if we started again from scratch, I think we could make the rig nicer looking. By having it be half the length, double the thickness of each strand, Possibly I'd even just make there be, we don't even need this midpoint. We can even do that now. I could delete the midpoint, and then on the leg spline, delete the midpoint. And now it's just 2 splines, and that's going to make it way cleaner. We're getting all this twisting on there, so I'm going to kill that off. And this is just, I think that overall length is a bit extreme. But yeah, now this might work better with just a start and end. So now we can just place that a little bit more carefully, and move and stretch that as we see fit, and retract. Yeah, see, that looks really good. I think that's actually decently similar to what we were seeing in the reference. And then those place, and they're static. And while those are static, the sphere is free to. I need to go into this and handles and remove and start. Okay. Now. That's because I deleted at one point. But now you can see I can like step this along. So you can see we've kind of got that creature going, as long as these were kind of like moving and undulating. Oh, the sphere's not inside of it the way I thought it was. Yeah, we'd have to figure out that twist. There are ways of doing it. I have done it, but I just don't remember. Or it's not immediately jumping to me. Delete that. End. Start. That's the ground. Twist, twist, twist. That's fine. I guess I'll make that, make a null. Start, end, reset, transform. That's fine. Okay, now put all of these into the null. Copy, paste. And rotate 180. And copy, paste, rotate 90. This is going to probably go slow. Copy, paste, rotate 45. Okay, so now, instantly, like, look how much more creature-like we instantly get. And now, if I search for the word start, here's all those start nulls. So the simplest possible version of this is taking all those start nulls and dropping them into the sphere. So now you'll see as I grab the sphere and stretch it, then now the sphere wouldn't be there in the final creature, but that's just a visual queuing in. I'll turn it off. So now you can see that I can like step all of those in one go. If we set these orientations correctly, then those would work. And now selecting the end point of any one of these, we could make one leg stretch out and place. And if that was timed properly, possibly via Espresso, possibly through other means, you make it so that this tentacle is growing its way out as the step is going, and we're only seeing 4 of these, or maybe 6 of these at a time as it goes. That's the effect. That might be how the rig is made. There's a lot of things I would probably do with like, you need the leg to be placed properly, so we wouldn't want just a start point and end point. We'd want a start, and then like the foot would end up with a second point above it, so that it controls the orientation. And then probably we need some rail splines. There's a lot more to like R&D on this, but what's the not the Demigorgon? What's the season 2 Stranger Things creature? Looks a little bit like that. Anyway, that was the thought. It gets a little bit crazy, but a lot of fun to be had with rigging this type of thing. If somebody wants to ask about this again next week, we could try building it again and figuring out even more specifically, but I'm not going to push any further today. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out. Another thank you again to Juan for the donations. That's very appreciated. Let me see if there's anything else. Make a sphere, brain. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the mind. Oh, yeah, the mind flare. Yeah, totally. I really liked the design of the mind flare. I thought it made for a good creepy creature. That was season 3. Sorry, it was season 3. The demi dogs or whatever they called it was season 2. So yeah, sorry, no more questions here. Oh yeah, there's a breakdown of it. I guess let's pop it open just, to follow up the question. It's fun to build without, but here is here's that same person's breakdown of how they made it. So they scattered some points. They instanced some roots. They deleted the far ones. Trim the... Okay, well, they had obviously a very different process. Displaced them. Final. Okay, well, completely different approach. Interesting. They must be taking those upper points and deforming them to the middle, so they already all existed. And then some sort of growth, which is similar to what we did. I guess instead, okay, so what they're doing, which is the nice thing that they're doing that was different than what we were doing, is they don't have to keyframe the walking. Like, they just move that midpoint, and then it just kind of fades in on each of those. Wonder... I don't know. Somebody hit me up again with the this question next week, if you're inclined, and then we'll see if we can tackle it more in this way. There might be ways of getting... I can think of ways of... I potentially have ways of like making that type of connection. It's the growth from one step to the next that would be maybe the challenging thing. But it's really cool. Like, it's a brilliant little rig. I like it. I like it. Okay, anyway, that will indeed wrap up this live stream. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out, as always. Regular stream next week. Yeah. Anything else? Nope, that should do it. Thank you, everybody, and see you in a week. Bye-bye.